Hello and welcome back to Everso. I'm Ever, and this will be the reading of the fic titled The Clairvoyant Boy by Marilyn May 103. I'll be reading chapter 22 and 23. Chapter 22. The Ghost of Kinlessness. The first thing that Izuku was greeted with upon entering his hospital room was a very distressed Yamada-sensei. The man had been pacing across the floor with what Izuku had assumed was anxiety, which had come to a halt as soon as he had laid eyes upon his missing student. By some miracle, Yamada-sensei seemed to be aware of Izuku's aversion to touch, as his fluttering hands never did land on the boy, although it did look like it was a very difficult job for the pro hero. "Oh my goodness, Midoriya!" The man dropped to his knees, giving him a better view of Izuku. "What happened? Are you injured? Here, come sit down." Izuku followed his teacher to the bed that he had originally fled from. He could sense the eyes of his schoolmates, no doubt eyeing the odd way he was leaning while he walked. However, Izuku couldn't find the effort to care, as his shoulder was starting to ache from the strain Oboro was accidentally putting on it. The pain quickly resided once Oboro dropped him on the mattress. Yamada-sensei was quick to call a nurse, most likely because of the recent blood stain now on Izuku's hospital gown. The stitches, still intact, kept him from bleeding out, but he had definitely torn one of two. At the sight of a nurse entering the room, Izuku felt his breath catch. Oboro squeezed his hand supportively, but it didn't do much against the storm growing in Izuku's chest. Due to his alert state, Izuku was easily able to catch when Eraserhead strode over to his bedside table, newly brought candle in hand. Without consulting a nurse, Eraserhead pulled a lighter from who knows where and lit the candle. Izuku's attention was immediately caught by the bright flame and the sweet aroma filtering into the room. It didn't immediately drown out the smell of the antiseptic, but that wasn't Izuku's biggest concern. Surprisingly, the scent was helping keep Izuku's thoughts in order. He strictly remembered the no-scented supplies rule that was kept in the psych ward. The fact that he was still able to smell something that wasn't an antiseptic was a sign that he wasn't back in the ward, as the candle would have been immediately confiscated. The erratic heaves could no longer be heard in Izuku's ear, instead having toned down just slightly fearful but otherwise normal inhales. There was still a layer of cold sweat coated Izuku's back, but it had been unfortunately ceasing its multiplying. He still kept a careful eye on the nurse as she finished up her conversation with Yamada-sensei and began to make his way over to him and Eraserhead. As soon as Izuku caught sight of the strained smile on the nurse's face, he knew she was Kurkis. One skill he had picked up during his time in the psych ward was the ability to know when people didn't like him but were hiding it for the sake of professionalism. Izuku wasn't the biggest fan of those types of people, but it was better than the nurses that didn't even bother to hide it. The nurse in front of him was keeping up the facade of not minding Izuku's quirk status, and she was doing it surprisingly well. Izuku was almost certain he was the only one who had picked up her distaste. He wondered if she was trying extra hard because she knew he was a student of UA, and that his pro-hero teacher was standing in a room with them. She was quick to administer the anesthetic, barely explaining what she was doing before doing it. Izuku was lucky. He had gotten stitches before and knew what to expect, or else he would most likely be freaking out right now. The general anxiety of being in a medical facility wouldn't help either, although Oboro's cold hand in his, as well as the candle, was doing wonders for Izuku's nerves. The thought that Eraserhead would step in if any medical malpractice was committed was comforting as well. Not that Izuku realized that. Probably wanting to get away from the quirkless freak, the nurse was quick to leave while the numbness kicked in. It seemed she wasn't stupid enough to try giving Izuku stitches while he could still feel them, unlike other nurses, Izuku remembered. However, it did seem she was still uncomfortable around Izuku, not that he wanted the nurse near him anyways. Now, the only occupant in the room were the UA students and faculty, which helped calm down Izuku just a smidge. With the previously reinstalled, Yamada-sensei turned to Izuku. "I've been meaning to ask you, how did you even get down from the window in one piece?" Izuku blinked, taking a moment to process the question. He really had been expecting to get lectured, so the friendly attitude came as a surprise. Izuku began, his bearings gathered. "I slid down the rain pipe, like the same way you would with those poles at the playground." Eraserhead raised an eyebrow in amusement before strolling over to the nearby window and sticking his head out. Confirming the truth of Izuku's tale, all it takes is a nod from the dark-haired man for President Mike to break out in a wide grin. The blonde, obviously entertained by his students' mischievous, if not slightly illegal antics. "You know, I had a friend who did something similar once," Yamada-sensei chuckled, "although he was sneaking out of my bedroom rather than a hospital. Although it wasn't very smart of him, considering his quirk could blow him down if he was smart enough to actually use it." Eraserhead cocked his small grin, but was quick to hide it within his captor scarf. Izuku had assumed the teachers had been friends since they were younger, but their similar reaction to Teo just confirmed it. However, due to his Izuku focus on the adults, he missed Oboro's matching smile. The two students in the room listened to Yamada-sensei's story intently, their attention successfully driven away from Izuku. The Clairvoyant was grateful, considering all the attention made him nervous. Yamada-sensei kept telling stories, mostly about his old friend. Before Izuku knew it, the nurse was back and administering his stitches, which went over with no qualms. The two teachers stayed even after Izuku was all patched up, no doubt supervising the three law-breaking students. Izuku wondered if they would have stayed if he didn't run off. But something gave him a feeling that at least Eraserhead wouldn't have left. Oboro stayed by his side the whole time, adding bits to Yamada-sensei's story that went unheard by almost everyone in the room. Izuku had to keep himself from bursting into uncontrolled laughter every time the ghost told him, skipped over details that improved to whatever tale President Mike had been reciting, something that kept Oboro quite amused. Eventually, visiting hours ended, forcing the two UA staff members to leave the hospital. They left with much more reluctance, not wanting to desert their delinquent students. Eventually, the nurses won them over, and the two were making their way out. But not before Eraserhead handed Izuku his lighter that he used earlier on the candle. The gesture stirred an unfamiliar emotion in Izuku's gut, as he hadn't even thought about the candle possibly coming out. The fact that Eraserhead had thought of that circumstance and to figure out a solution warmed Izuku's chest in a way he rarely encountered. It wasn't necessary for the teacher to worry about him, especially considering he wasn't even one of the men's students. But he still had. Eraserhead had gone out of his way to make sure Izuku was comfortable in the unsettling environment, even going as far as to give up one of his possessions. Izuku had originally panicked about taking something that did not belong to him, but both Eraser and Oboro were quick to reassure him that he was just borrowing it and the man would be back for it. As much as he hated to admit it, the confirmation that he was not stealing the teacher's lighter was enough to calm him back down, allowing Eraserhead to leave. With the two adults gone, Todoroki, Ida, and Izuku started preparing to get some shut-eye. Oboro was also in the room, but considering he was a ghost and didn't need sleep, there wasn't much for him to do. So he just continued to tell stories while floating above Izuku, the younger boy reacting with a tired hum whenever it was appropriate. As soon as the lights were shut off, Izuku was forced to come to the rushing realization of how exhausted he was. Jumping over a window and running down the street had taken a lot of energy from the boy, especially after he came down from his panicky adrenaline rush. It took no more than 2 minutes for Izuku to fall asleep, the candle still burning. Izuku almost collapsed as soon as he stepped into a small apartment. He was beat, even though it was only midday. Between the long train ride home and the terrifying meeting with the chief of police, Izuku barely had enough energy to haul his belongings up the stairs, including his new candle. On the thought of the chief of police, Izuku shuddered. In all honesty, the meeting had went quite terribly. At first, they had just been visited by the miners endeavor. Yamada-sensei had already been in the room, so only really the new addition was manual. Well, that was until they were introduced to the chief of police. The man's tall and bulky stature already put Izuku on edge, knowing it would be quite difficult to escape from such an attack. The dog head replacing a humanoid one was also a little bit strange, but Izuku had seen weirder in the world of quirks. The man had immediately gone into a tangent about all the laws that the three had broken. However, he did seem to be singling out Izuku, staring right at him while he scolded the trio. Like he had all his life. Izuku had just taken it, although this time he wasn't sure if it was because he was quirkless or if it was because he was technically a civilian. In all probability, it was a mixture of the two, but Izuku couldn't really be sure. The other two boys in the room looked beyond ticked off. Izuku assumed it was because they didn't have near the amount of experience that he did with being lectured for doing the right thing. Although it was a possibility Todoroki had dealt with a similar situation, considering the worsening angry scowl on his face and the clenched fists at his side. However, when the chief mentioned legal consequences, Izuku felt himself pale. If there was one thing that would ruin his life, it would be a criminal record. Izuku was already likely to be unemployed once he finally graduated due to his quirk status, but with a criminal record on top of his chances were akin to zero. It wouldn't matter if he was a UA student, because the quirklessness on top of a criminal record would immediately blacklist him from any possible employment. On the topic of UA, there was absolutely no shot of him staying enrolled. Izuku knew that the staff would be eager to get him kicked out. Once again, because of the lack of his quirk. If he gained a criminal record, then he would surely be expelled. Hell, he may even be expelled for just getting involved in a situation like the one he was currently in, criminal record aside. Noticing his friend's spiral, Oboro was quick to grip Izuku's hand, which stopped the boy from working himself into a panic attack and allowing him to tune into the harsh insults Todoroki was currently throwing at the harem of. Yamada-sensei was quick to calm the two-toned boy down, which worked somehow. However, It was enough for the police chief to finish his statement, relieving the back of the legal consequences that would be involved in the event. Izuku almost started to kissing the chief's boots at the revelation, but he opted for a sign of relief instead. Sure, he was a little bit sour that Endeavor would be taking the credit, considering the bro was a flaming piece of garbage. Nevertheless, it was better than a black market on his perfect record. Black mark on his perfect record. With a sigh, Izuku flopped into his ratty couch, letting his duffel bag slide onto the floor. Oboro snickered at Izuku's expense before joining him on the squeaky furniture. As usual, the couch didn't move in the slightest when Oboro took his seat. The two sat in silence, comfortable one, for only a moment before Oboro decided to speak up, no doubt angsty from the lack of conversation between the two friends. "What you thinking about?" he asked, his head lolling to rest against the back of the sofa. "Not much," Izuku replied, his eyes slipping shut. "Just letting everything hit me, trying to decipher how embarrassed I am right now." Oboro chuckled. "Yeah? For what?" Izuku groaned, dragging his hands down the face in a slow and slightly painful movement. "I don't know. All of it? The main thing is probably how worried Yamada-sensei was. I mean, did you see those messages?" And, yep, the main thing looping in Izuku's mind was the friendly messages that had been on Razorhead's phone. The only benefit from the whole interaction was getting to know President Mike's civilian name, which would let him update the man's page in his analysis book, although Izuku was sure he had heard that name before. Izuku shot up in his seat, eyes blown wide, and turned towards Oboro. "You knew Yamada-sensei when you were alive! That's why you hang out around him!" Izuku accused, a finger now pointing right in Oboro's nose. The ghost went cross-eyed for a moment, trying to get a look at the finger threatening to poke his eyes out. His palms raised and he leaned back slightly. Izuku lowered his finger. "Have I never told you that before?" "Yeah, me, Hisashi, Shoda were all buddies back in high school," Oboro informed, an eyebrow slightly raised. The ghost looked quite amused, but Izuku swore he could see a small hint of concern over his enthusiasm. In return, Izuku furrowed his brows, deep in thought. "Shoda? That must be a Razorhead, right? It would explain his reaction at the hospital. Actually, this explains a lot of what went down at the hospital." "Really?" Oboro asked. "How so?" "You kept adding things to Yamada-sensei's stories. I didn't question it at the time because probably I was a little bit loopy, but it makes so much sense now," Izuku explained. Oboro shot him a goofy smile. "Yeah, you were a little bit out of it, probably because you were so tired." Izuku smiled softly, appreciative of the domestic moment as he sunk into the couch further, relief seeping into his bones. Izuku had been entirely grateful when the hospital staff had not questioned his lack of a parental guardian. It was most likely because he was quirkless, and most of the staff didn't care about his well-being. It was also the only time when his lack of quirk helped him out, as any possible suspicion from his teachers would be majority unhelpful. They had already been a little skeptical when he had walked out of the hospital himself, promising that his mother was waiting for him in the lobby. It had been nearly impossible to get Eraserhead out of his tail. But an accidental distraction from Ida and a promise to text the man when he was safely reunited with his mom was enough to deter him. Izuku sent the text as soon as he was out of the hospital doors, double-checking to make sure Eraserhead hadn't been secretly tailing him, and then made his way to the train station. Yamada-sensei had brought his duffel bag earlier, not wanting the boy to have to stop by the agency on his way back home. President Mike had also told Izuku to hand the duffel bag over to his mom as soon as he saw her. Izuku had agreed, and technically he was lying. He would give it to his mom, but he plans not to see her, so that deal is soon thrown out the window. As soon as Oboro realized this, the ghost had been appalled. In no less than 3 seconds, the duffel bag had been lifted off Izuku's shoulder and placed on Oboro's. The cold hands the ghost had on Izuku's shoulder allowed him to keep a physical form to hold the duffel bag, although to anyone else it looked like the bag was floating. Sure, if Oboro really wanted, he could manifest a physical form, but the two had realized early on that it drains a lot of energy from Izuku. With that in mind, the two kept Oboro invisible unless it was absolutely necessary. Another thing they had discovered about Izuku's quirk was that his own control on how he spent his energy. Izuku found he could also decide if Oboro could be visible or even tangible if he truly wanted to. It was the main reason Oboro had been able to turn invisible and immediately start spilling Izuku's secret. The other reason was Oboro's genuine respect for Izuku making his own decisions, as he understood the boy hadn't really been able to make any of his own when he was younger. The new revelation in his ability had still some thought in Izuku. Oboro had been wanting him to tell the Yui staff about his quirk, but he had never had any proof to justify his claims, as he always refused. But now that he could show Oboro off to the other people, he was a little tempted. However, as soon as he tried to arrange a meeting of sorts, with his words had caught up his throat and he had chickened out. The instinctual fear from keeping such a secret for years had seized him by his throat. It immediately squashed that train of thought down. But as of right now, with Izuku laying side by side with Oboro on his worn-out couch, he couldn't help but think that he didn't mind his quirk. Yes, it had been the source of almost all the issues in his life, but without it, he would have never met Oboro, his best friend, his family. He thinks he would be okay, not telling anyone about his quirk and just living life like a quirkless person. The opinions of others wouldn't matter to him as long as he had Oboro beside him, the person who had helped him to feel like a person again. With the ghost by his side, Izuku could tackle anything. In the end, it all would be alright. Chapter 23. The Ghost of Decision. As soon as he got up, Izuku could tell it was going to be an annoying day. Why, you ask? Well, it was because he could already smell something burning and he hadn't even gotten up. The most likely scenario was that Oboro was trying to cook something. Trying being the key word, because whatever it was supposed to be was most definitely reduced to a clump of ash. However, the only way that Oboro could possibly muster up the strength to actually hold the frying pan was for Izuku to be touching him. And only way that was possible was if Izuku was in the kitchen, which meant that something wasn't supposed to be on fire was. probably the building. Fully expecting to be evacuated, Izuku blinked open his eyes. He, however, was immediately thrown off guard by the marble counter his cheek had been resting upon. It was, in fact, Oboro attempting to make breakfast. In all honesty, the feat was quite impressive, considering the ghost had to keep a hand on Izuku the entire time he cooked, therefore not burning anything down while one-handed. Sure, if Oboro really wanted, he could use both hands, but that would involve Oboro floating in the air and keeping his feet touching Izuku, which Izuku appreciated not happening, as he is quite fond of waking up to crusty teenage food in his face. However, it was good that Izuku had woken up when he did. Oboro was 2 seconds away from burning down his kitchen, which could not be afforded to pay for, nor explained. So, despite wanting nothing more than to fall back asleep and leave this disaster to Oboro, he reluctantly got up. Izuku! Oboro explained with much exuberance that Izuku almost tumbled from the stool he was on. Blinking once more, Izuku looked to the oven, which was a lot closer than it should be, considering all the stools were supposed to be at the island. But it seems that Oboro moved the one Izuku was on, so that he could use the stove while still touching the living boy. With huge exile, Izuku cracked his stiff back. He could see Oboro wince in sympathy as the loud crackle that echoed through the room. Morning, Izuku said with a small wave to Oboro after he had finished stretching. So, what you cooking? Oboro looked at the burnt monstrosity on the pan, and once again, a hand rose so the ghost could sheepishly rub at the back of his head. I was trying to make you some eggs and toast. I thought it was easy, but I never actually learned how to cook, and I guess I underestimated my skills. Also, cooking one hand is hard. Oboro defended, extremely waving at the hot mess of the kitchen. Izuku raised his hands in defense. Hey, I'm not judging, but I do think I'm going to choose to eat something else. You see, I'm not a huge fan of straight charcoal. With a squawk of offense, Oboro dramatically clutched his heart. That is, until he looked down upon the semblance of a meal that he had created and curled his nose in disgust. Yeah, I don't think I can blame you, the ghost sighed, accepting that his kitchen skills were seemingly non-existent. Grabbing the pan and bringing it to the sink, Izuku snorted. I'll teach you how to cook if you like. Not right now, of course, but maybe before our next investigation. That's only if you're up for it, though. Narrowly missing one of the open cabinets, Izuku watched Oboro beam. I would love to, but yeah, definitely not right now. If you take any longer, you're going to be late. In a flash of panic, Izuku dropped the pan into the sink of overflowing dishes. A swift turn towards the microwave clock let Izuku know that he is indeed close to being late for school. What? Izuku exclaimed, this time banging his head on the cabinet during the hassle. Why didn't you tell me that earlier? Oboro laughs as Izuku launches himself down the hallway and towards his bedroom. The sound only being muffled when Izuku slams the door to give himself some semblance of privacy while he changes. The laughing has ceased by the time Izuku emerges from the bedroom and throws himself into the bathroom. However, if Oboro had seen Izuku's display of trying to brushing his teeth at the same moment he had applied the deodorant, all while trying to tame his chaotic curse, then the laughing would surely continue. Skipping breakfast altogether, Izuku was quick to snatch up his backpack and keys from the island, not even giving Oboro a warning before rushing out the front door and locking it behind him. Rude, Oboro scolded once he had caught up. "You could have held the door open for me." Slightly jogging, Izuku raised an eyebrow. "Why does that matter? You can phase through walls." Oboro half dramatically from his floating position, reminding Izuku of a movie-typical sunbather. "It's still rude." Deciding to save his breath for the tractor train, Izuku just smiled. Fortunately, Oboro understood the message and held up a conversation for both of them, his undead lungs not actually needing air to stay conscious. Izuku was finally able to partake in the conversation when he was snuggling on the train. He was sure to pull his phone up to his ear so it looked like he was talking to a human living being, and not a wall. When Izuku stopped finally came around, he and Oboro got off. Via his jog to the station, Izuku had caught the necessary train, allowing him to walk rather than sprint the rest of the way to UA. The first thing Izuku was greeted with when entering his classroom was a beaming Yamada-sensei, who was currently making conversation with an exhausted-looking Hitoshi. When the hero's sharp eyes caught wind of Izuku, he was quick to wave the boy over. "Hey, Midoriya! Perfect timing. I was just wanted to let both of you know that Principal Nezu wanted to meet with you," Yamada-sensei explained, a warm grin on his face. "You two aren't in trouble or anything of sorts if you're worried. It's just about transfer paperwork as well as your internships." Hitoshi nodded, and Izuku was quick to parry the movement. Yamada-sensei's smile somewhat widened before he shooed the students off. Izuku and Hitoshi obliged with their teacher's commands, making their way to the principal's office without falter. As per usual, the door swung open before either of the boys could knock. How the principal knew they were coming did not concern Izuku. Definitely not. With only a glance, Izuku could already see Principal Nezu waiting. Neither Hitoshi, Izuku, or even Oboro stood in the entrance very long, not wanting to waste the important figure's time. "Midoriya, Shinzo, great to see you two," Nezu chimed from his place behind the desk, uncharacteristically not spotting a cup of tea, although that could be due to the fact that there were papers that needed to be signed neatly scattered around the desk, and any beverage could ruin the documents. "Likewise," Izuku responded, bowing slightly. While he rose, he immediately clasped his hands together in front of him, not wanting to be disrespectful by showing the sweaty things in his pockets. With absolutely no effort put into respecting his elders, Hitoshi just nodded. Izuku had to resist smacking him upside the head. However, Izuku didn't think physical violence would be something appreciated by the principal. "First and foremost," Nezu stated, his tail flicking back and forth behind him, "I would like to inform you of something that is being told to your classmates right now, and I wouldn't want you to miss out any important information due to our little meeting." This time, both Izuku and Hitoshi nod, neither student having anything to add. "I would like to inform both of you that UA is inflicting a dorm program as a part of our huge security update. With the League of Villains still at large, we want to keep a close eye on our students. Unfortunately, moving into the dorms will become a requirement, but fear not. If you do not wish to partake in our dorm program at UA, you would be sent a stunning letter of recommendation that will surely get you into any other high school of your choice. Your homeroom teacher will have the necessary documents for your parents to sign if you wish to proceed with the program. He should also have a package with any small details that we won't be covering here. Does that sound alright to you two?" "Yes, sir," the students reply, although Hitoshi drops the formalities. "Perfect," the chimera beams, clasping his palms together in front of him. For the second topic, I would want to discuss your possible transfer to the heroics course. That is, if you're still up for it. Hitoshi responds so fast, it almost gives Izuku whiplash. Of course, what do I have to do? What do I have to sign? Oboro snorted at Hitoshi's impatience. Although Izuku can't find it in his heart to be amused. He knows Hitoshi had been trying to become a hero since before he even knew what a hero was, but couldn't due to the unfair circumstances. He knew that Hitoshi had faced unjust and even cruel discrimination, all because he had a certain quirk. Izuku also knew the feeling of everyone telling you that your dreams are unattainable and how much it sucked. Alright, well, yes, that's a yes from Shinzo. Nezu smiled, checking something off on one of the documents. How about you, Midoriya? Izuku blinked, once again forgetting that these meetings were also about him. It took a moment for him to clear his throat and plan out exactly what he wanted to say. The ordeal of packing away most of his belongings was not a huge project for Izuku, especially considering he was made to leave all of his kitchen supplies behind. All he had left were a few pairs of clothing he had, as well as the Wi-Fi box he refused to leave behind. Sure, Wi-Fi could be provided by the dorm building, but Izuku really doesn't want to do similar activities on his hero school's Wi-Fi. Especially considering he had no doubt that Nezu would be keeping track of everyone's search history and maybe even emails. He also had to pack his costume for the night outings, but that was also buried somewhere deep in the box of his clothes. With only 3 small cardboard boxes he needed to carry, Izuku did not call the help of a vehicle. Considering the uniform he was wearing, no small thief would even consider nabbing Izuku's staff, not with such a huge large risk of him being a hero student with a powerful quirk. Hey, Izuku! Oboro chimed, phasing through the front door of the apartment. The ghost was quick to stop when he noticed the balancing act going on. Ooh, yikes! Need a hand? Without waiting for a response, Oboro linked his arm around Izuku and snatched one of the boxes, relieving Izuku's arms of enough weight so that the living boy could exit his home and lock the door. Thanks, Izuku said, pocketing his keys. In any other circumstances, he would just hand the keys over to the landlord and permanently move into UA, but the packet had stated that they would be returning home during holidays, and Izuku would rather have a home than to have to stay in a hotel. And he wanted to have he would have to settle for a creepy motel during holidays if he had to pay for his dorm. But UA had generously offered to cover the full expense of the dorm rooms, including meals. That gave Izuku the available funds to keep his apartment. Besides, it would be strange if Izuku showed up to the doors with every kitchen appliance he owned, including the refrigerator. Not wanting the box to just appear to be floating, both Izuku and Oboro worked to keep the ghost visible. A silent agreement that they will give all their boxes back to Izuku once they get close to UA. The train ride is uneventful, except for the few odd stairs they attacked. The two arrived at the destination with no qualms. Oboro helped transfer his box into Izuku's pile, his hands now free to wave around while he talks. So, how are you feeling about moving in? 17 with 17 other rowdy teenagers? Oboro humors. If Izuku wasn't currently balancing all of his possessions, he would be sure that Oboro would still have lightly elbowed him. blowing a head of hair from between his eyes. Izuku sighed. I don't know. Not great. I'm really not going to enjoy my privacy being constantly invited, but I also hate people, especially people my age, so yeah, uh, not great. Oboro winced in sympathy. Yeah, good point. Sometimes I forget you're not as social as I was. With a raised eyebrow, Izuku scoffs. Was? You're still crazy social. Just because you haven't been able to talk with many people doesn't change that. A slightly sad, but soft smile crossed over Oboro's face, an expression that Izuku can't really see due to the obstacles blocking his field of vision. Yeah, I guess. Oboro says. A humorous laugh makes its way out of the ghost. Izuku can tell he's upset with his current circumstance. Just as he's about to provide some semblance of comfort to his friend, Izuku nearly runs into some large burgundy door. The only thing saving him is Oboro grabbing onto his wrist, as well as the handle of the door, allowing Izuku to pass into the dawn without collision. With a quick scan of the main floor, Izuku can see none of the students have arrived. It made sense, considering Izuku had left early on purpose to avoid a possible crowded train. It's easy for the boy to find his room and begin unpacking his stuff, with no one to bother him but his undead companion. With the privacy of his own room, Izuku is free to touch and talk to Oboro all that he wants. They keep the ghost visibility off, not want to waste Izuku's energy when the boy can already see Oboro. It also provides a failsafe in case someone comes barging through the room. It only takes half an hour for all the boxes to be emptied, but by the end of it, Izuku is starving. Him and Oboro begin to make their way down towards the lobby. A snack on both teens' mind. Izuku's quite surprised to see another figure in the room. The spiky red hair immediately catching Izuku's eyes. He avoids the person via a quick sidestep, watching as his fellow students begin to make their way up the stairs without a word. A frown makes its way onto Izuku's face. He knew the news of his quirklessness had spread throughout his class, but he really didn't expect the hostility to start up so fast. Hearing more chatter outside the door, Izuku sighed. With a step of courage, he makes his way over to where his class is no doubt gathering outside. Oboro trails behind as Izuku swings the door open, being greeted by no other than Class 1C. And that's it, and what a bait! I will tell you that when I first read it, I was convinced he had turned 1A. Also with the bait of the spiky red hair. I mean, come on. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird that, at least for me, that Kirishima wouldn't be talking to him, but well, I had hope, but yeah. Also, I will be going on a real ramble right now, so just don't mind me now. But also, I wanted to apologize for the little wait there was between any episodes coming out, and that was because me and So were, kind of preparing ourselves for, how do you say that? Like the CAE, yeah, the CAE, like tests coming up, and now we're just waiting for results, so yeah, just kind of stressful, but I hope I get it. In case anyone who doesn't know what a CAE is, it's a test for C1 English that you have to take if you want to have any sort of tell that yes, you can in fact speak English. Yeah, it was very nerve-wracking. Um, it was very also different because I had taken some similar tests before, but it was always on paper, and that was digital. So I had not expected that. Also, there was we when we had to do the written part because it like contains of written part, the use of English and reading and listening and also speaking. These are 4 parts, but 4 parts. Use of English, reading us with the use of English. So, what? Use of English, writing, listening, and speaking. 4, yes. But yes, that was very nerve-wracking. I hope we get both. We both get it. But yeah, I still have 10 days left of waiting. But yeah, I do sincerely hope I do get it. Also, if you have any recommendation for a fic that I could podfic next, that would be greatly appreciated. Because I don't want to scare you, but at the time of the recording, the Clairvoyant boy has 26 chapters, and while they are coming out, they're coming out like, I don't want to say slow, but the pace is rather relaxed, but also I mean the quality of it is amazing. I mean, yeah. So yeah, if anyone of you has any recommendations, I would be glad to take them. Also, I think you can recommend whatever fics you like. Yeah, I will read them nonetheless. But I don't think I'm going to podfic any like unfinished fics right now, because with me doing Clairvoyant Boy, and well, his leading lines, how that had ended, I would like to actually do an ended series, and also with So doing the DCU stuff like One Inheritance Gotham and Drake Exploded Bright. I'm sorry, Dad. Which, if you are into DC fandom and didn't know that we made 100 Gotham into a podfic, or the Drake Exploded Bright, I'm sorry, Dad, then I highly recommend checking it out. So did a very great job of it. And also, if you didn't read or didn't read that fic, this fic, I also recommend maybe checking out on our channel. And if it catches your attention, then heading out to the link that's in the descriptions of every video we post, and seeing what you got there, because oh god, I'm rambling so much. Well, I really like to ramble. This one ramble can be longer, I guess. Well, oh wow, yeah, I think that's enough of me talking, and yeah, have a great night or day. Have a great life, in fact, and bye bye. See you in the next one.